Today we are going to review our Unit 2 materials. The first thing we're going to talk about is our proportions and how we set them up. So the first thing we need to do is we need to know what we need to find. So we need to read the problem carefully to identify what piece of information is missing. This will be represented by a variable in our proportion. Usually I like to use x for that variable. So here's our first word problem. Paloma walked 0.75 miles in 15 minutes. If she continues walking at the same pace, how long will it take her to walk 3 miles? So here we are comparing miles to minutes. So that means in our comparison we need miles, but we're missing minutes, so that is our missing info. So we are looking for how many minutes it will take. So now we need to figure out what do we actually know. So we need to read the problem carefully again to identify what pieces of information we have. The amounts and units are very important. So again, let's read. Paloma walked 0.75. We have miles in 15 minutes. If she continues walking at the same pace, how long will it take her to walk 3 miles? So notice, I use different colors here because it does help organize our information. So we have miles in the black and minutes in red. So we have 2 miles, 2 different sets of miles, and we only have 1 set of minutes. Okay, so we are comparing miles to minutes. So now we need to set up a proportion. To set up a proportion, we need to keep the units in the same place on both ratios. So let's pull across the information that we had in the last 2 slides. The missing info was minutes, and we had 0.75 miles in 15 minutes. Then we want to know 3 miles, how long that would take. So now we need to match up where everything goes. So we have miles right here, and we have minutes right here. The miles are set up to go on the top. So we have 0.75 miles, and we also have 3 miles. Now the minutes go on the bottom, and we need to make sure we keep everything matched up. So 0.75 stays with 15. Those are in the same line up here, so they need to be in the same line here. So we put 15 right under 0.75. And then our question mark, or an X, goes right under 3. So now we need to solve the proportion. And we're going to do that not by this one-step equation, so you can mark that out. And we are going to write in cross multiply and divide. So now we are going to cross multiply, so we multiply 15 and 3. So 15 times 3. 5 times 3 is 15. 3 times 1 is 3, plus 1 is 4. So we get 45, and that goes right up here. Now, when the x is below, we have to divide by the only number that we haven't used. So right now, it's to the side. So we're dividing by 0.75. So 45 goes in, 0.75 on the outside. Now when we have a decimal on the outside, we have to move our decimal twice to the right. What we do to the outside, we also have to do to the inside. 1 and 2. We have to add in those zeros for place value. So now I'm going to rewrite the problem just to make it a little neater. So 75 now, divided by 4,500. 75 goes into 4 0 times. 75 goes into 45 0 times. 75 goes into 450, I'm going to guess 6 times. And it is 6 times, exactly. Now we have to bring that 0 down. 75 goes into 0 times. So our answer is 60. So that tells us that x equals 60 minutes. Meaning for 3 miles, it will take us 60 minutes. So the last step is to make sure our answer is correct. And we do that by cross-multiplying. So we do again 15 times 3. We learned in the last slide that that was 45. Then we do 60 times 7.75, sorry. So we multiply 0.75 times by 60. There's 2 decimals, 1, 2. And we get 45 up here. So since we have the 45 here and 45 here, our answer of 60 that we got last slide is correct. So now we're going to look at unit rates in different ways that we can find them. The first way we're going to look at is unit rate from a table. So we need to find the value of 1 in the left column. The number in the column to the right of the 1 would be the unit rate. If there is no 1 in the table, like here, we need to set up a proportion using another pair in the table and a variable over 1 to solve. So we're going to set up a proportion. We should know by now that a proportion is 2 fractions. For the sake of this demonstration, I'm going to go ahead and make a third just to help us keep our numbers straight. So we're going to have y over x. And then we need to choose a pair in the table. I'm going to choose the first one. It's usually the easiest one to work with, 4 and 2. So x is 4, y is 2. Then it says to use the variable over 1, then solve. So our normal variable is x, but we already have an x and a y here. So let's use a, and we put it over 1. Now we should all know by now how to solve a proportion, and that's to cross multiply and then divide. So we cross multiply 1 times 2 to get 2, and then we divide down. 2 divided by 4, we should know that one, should be 1/2 or 0.5. So the unit rate in this table would be 1/2 or 0.5. The next way we can get unit rates is from graphs. So the first step is to find the point 1x on the line, and then the point would be your unit rate. If you cannot clearly identify the coordinates of point 1x on the line, set up a proportion using another point on the line and a variable over 1 to solve. So if we follow this line right here, we go to where the first point hits 1, and that would tell us our x. So we all know how a coordinate plane works. We go over to find the first number to 1, so that's our 1 here. Then we go up to where it hits the line. That tells us that's a perfect corner, so our x, or our variable here, would be 0.5. So our unit right here is 0.5. So now we're going to look at unit rates in the real world, or just word problems. So the first step is to write the information you have been given as a ratio. So I like writing my ratios as fractions. So we have 42.5 minutes to 5 miles. Then the second step is to either divide or set up a proportion. With unit rates, I like just to divide. So we go top in, 42.5, bottom out. So 5 goes into 4 0 times. 5 goes into 42 8 times, and that's 40. We get 2 left over, bring our decimal straight up, bring the 5 down. 5 goes into 25 5 times, so our unit right here is 8.5. So that tells us in 1 mile she can run it in 8.5 minutes. So the last way we're going to find a unit rate is in an equation. So in an equation, the coefficient of the variable, or the number being multiplied by the variable, is the unit rate. For example, y equals 2x is telling us that y changes by 2 for each x. So in our example down here, we have it set up in y equals kx form that we've learned earlier this year. So we can just pull out the coefficient, or the number being multiplied by x, and that's 4. 4 right there, that is our unit rate. This is probably one of the easiest ways to find our unit rate.